Okay, here we go. Again. Um, The New York Times Film Festival Review. Vive l'amour. A New Apartment as Empty as Its Occupants by Stephen Holden. March 23rd, 1995. Section C, page 13. Michelangelo Antonioni's brooding meditations on urban alienation may not be fashionable in America right now, but they have exerted a powerful influence on modern Asian cinema. Vive l'amour, Tsai Ming-Liang's haunting second feature, is a virtual homage to the Antonioni films La Notte and Eclipse. As in those early 60s masterpieces, the gleaming anonymous architecture and thoroughfares of a booming metropolis, here it is contemporary Taipei, frame the blank spiritual lives of characters who drift through the city in a state of melancholy disconnection. I'm going to do that paragraph again. As in those early 60s masterpieces, the gleaming anonymous architecture and thoroughfares of a booming metropolis, here it is contemporary Taipei, frame the blank spiritual lives of characters who drift through the city in a state of melancholy disconnection. The Taiwanese film, which has screenings this evening at 6 and on Saturday at 9 p.m. at the Museum of Modern Art as part of the new director's new film series, has a wonderfully evocative central conceit. Mei Mei, Yang Kui Mei, a chic young real estate agent, misplaces the keys to a vacant duplex apartment in a spanking new high-rise. Xiao Kang Li Kangsheng, a shy young man who is later revealed to be gay, finds the keys and begins living there surreptitiously. When Mei Mei is not tidying up the apartment and communicating by cellular phone with her employer, she, too, uses the place for trysts with When Mei Mei is not tidying up the apartment and communicating by cellular phone with her employer, she, too, uses the place for trysts with Young Chen Chaoyong, a man she picks up in a luncheonette for casual sex. Okay, do that again. Young Chen Chaoyong. Luncheonette. Luncheonette. Okay. When Mei Mei is not tidying up the apartment and communicating by cellular phone with her employer, she too uses the place for trysts with Young Chen Chaoyong, a man she picks up in a luncheonette for casual sex. A man she picks up in a luncheonette for casual sex. The characters coexist in the apartment without confronting one another. On one occasion, Xiao Kang, to avoid being discovered, hides under a bed on which Mei Mei and Young make love. A situation that would normally be played as a bedroom farce is treated instead as a portrait of erotic angst, with overtones of no exit. For when Xiao Kang eventually meets Young, he falls secretly in love with him. Both the director and his characters are obsessed with the glossier surfaces of modern life. In this languidly paced film, the camera lingers on the apartment space, immaculate interiors, as intently as on the characters' grooming habits. One of the apartment's attractions is a whirlpool bath in which the characters luxuriously immerse themselves. But as the film makes graphically clear, solitary sensual gratification is no palliative for an underlying sense of emptiness. But as the film makes graphically clear, solitary sensual gratification is no palliative for an underlying sense of emptiness. No sooner has Shao Kang finished his bath than he slashes his wrist in a half-hearted suicide attempt. In crucial ways, all three characters are not what they seem. Ah Hyung tells Mei Mei that he works in imports and exports, which seems like stretching things for an unlicensed street peddler who has to hide from the police. Shao Kang, when alone, acts out an elaborate autoerotic fantasy of himself as a woman. Mei Mei, who seems crisp and tough throughout most of the film, is ultimately revealed to be seriously depressed. At times the symbolism becomes heavy-handed. Shao Kang has a job selling cremation containers, and when the movie takes a digressive tour of an enormous mortuary, the metaphor seems pushy. The end of the film aspires to a grand, Antonioni-like gesture, with an extended tracking shot of the unhappy Mei Mei walking through a desolate urban park. Blending allusions to L'Avventura, La Notte, and The Passenger, the scene ends with a prolonged, highly emotional close-up of Mei Mei. But Yang Kuei Mei is no Jean Moreau. Am I saying that? Jean Moreau, yeah, I think so. But Yang Kuei Mei is no... What is it? Jean or Jean? Jean Moreau. Jean Moreau. You're right, I think. But Yang Kuei Mei is no Jean Moreau or Monica Vitti. Where the performances in Antonioni's films balance the symbolism with a feeling of character, Vive l'Amour's trio remain abstract gossamer figures in a moody urban reverie. Okay.
The New York Times. Screen. Antonioni offers the night. Story of a lost union at Little Carnegie, Jean Moreau and Mastroianni in cast. By Bosley Crowther. February 20th, 1962. Page 0. At least Michelangelo Antonioni lets us know what he's about in his new film, The Night, La Notte, which came to the Little Carnegie yesterday. He is coolly cataloguing with his camera the wealth of telltale things that occur in the course of an afternoon and evening in the life of an Italian novelist's wife as she comes to the dismal conclusion that her husband no longer loves her, that she no longer loves him, and she wishes she were dead. Where Signor Antonioni was elusive, if not obscure, in tracing a dramatic line in L'Avventura, his controversial film of last year, he is absolutely explicit in tracing the line in this. He begins with the wife and her husband on their way to a hospital in Milan to visit a dear friend who is dying. This is told to them before they enter the room. And after this harrowing experience, during which everyone tries to be brave, they go on to a chic cocktail party to celebrate the publication of the husband's new book. Here the wife, still oppressed by sadness, begins to feel lonely, out of place, and wanders off on an aimless excursion that ultimately takes her to a rundown park on the edge of Milan. It is a place she used to visit with her husband. She thinks of him and telephones him at home. Relieved to know where she is, he comes to fetch her, but she still can't make contact with him. So it goes through the evening. The couple visit a dinner club and watch a smoothly erotic dance act. They are both detached and bored. Then they go on to a huge garden party at the elegant, modernistic home of a Milanese business magnate and spend the long, humid, tedious night fumbling with other people and finding themselves ever more apart and alone. The husband is soundly frustrated in his pursuit of a solemn, lonely girl, and the wife is violently shaken by the evident indifference of her spouse. Finally, they leave the dying party to go on to a golf course at dawn, and face the sober truth of their lost union and the feeble hope that they may still patch it up. That is the line of the drama, and we state it in order to reveal the simplicity of the progression and the complexity of the tensions implied. For here, as in L'Avventura, it is not the situation so much as it is the intimations of personal feelings, doubts, and moods that are the substance of the film. and these Signor Antonioni has implanted and developed with a skill that is excitingly fertile, subtle, and awesomely intuitive. Upon a crisply graphic background of real buildings and places in Milan that would lead one to expect the exposition of a virtually objective document, he has superimposed and intruded a completely subjective account of the interior loneliness, boredom, and emotional exhaustion of a woman and a man. Too sensitive and subtle for apt description are his pictorial fashionings of a social atmosphere, a rarefied intellectual climate, a psychologically stultifying milieu, and his haunting evocations within them of individual symbolisms and displays of mental and emotional aberrations. Even boredom is made interesting by him. There is, for instance, a sequence in which a sudden downpour turns a listless garden party into a riot of foolish revelry, exposing the lack of stimulation before nature takes a flagellating hand. Or there's a shot of the crumpled wife leaning against a glass wall, looking out into the rain that tells in a flash of all her ennui, desolation, and despair. As the wife, Jeanne Moreau does a fine job of generating the sodden spirit of vagrant moods and catching the glints of resignation and accusation in her eyes. Marcello Mastroianni, La Dolce Vita lad, is foggy and obtuse as the husband, and Monica Vitti is particularly flat and lackluster as the young woman with whom the husband is unable to communicate. Bernhard Vichy, the German film director, is impressive in the brief role of the dying man, and several Milanese citizens are colorful as garden party types. There is a lot of Italian conversation that is complicated and hard to get from the heavy English subtitles. This adds further to the difficulty of fathoming this film, which already demands a large measure of sophistication and sensitivity in its audience. Whether one finds it stimulating or a redundant bore will depend, we suspect, in large measure upon the subtle attunement of one's mood.